excellent cue for our next discussion. And let me just, to cap off this particular session, let me just ask the question. You know, because I think Doug's got the right idea. You know, what's in the future? But, you know, before we answer that, why is this happening? Why is this happening? And panel members and audience, I welcome your comments. You know, should this be happening? Should we be driving towards 100% on time and 0 ppm? And if we are, why? Why is it? You know, did somebody make this up? Is it just, you know, some kind of evil prime OEM plot? Or, you know, what is this? Why is it happening? Anybody? I thought we were going to break. We are. We are. What happened in our industry in the last 10 years that caused so much focus on 100% on time and 0 ppm?
Good afternoon. Brad Alexander with Parker. And from the Tier 1 perspective, I mean, in our industry, it's pretty much a given that quality needs to be 100%, right? There's no pulling over on the side of the road when you're flying an aircraft. Delivery, we look at the value of the aircraft and having it stopped, whether the value of the part that's stopping it is $5 or $50,000, it has a huge impact on the production cycle. So I think we're all raising the threshold up to 0 RPPM, 100% on-time delivery. So what's next? The bigger companies, I think, are looking at the partnering with the suppliers, and in exchange for the long-term agreement that's 7 years or life of contract, there is what we call Parker process of continuous improvement, and we expect to see a little deflation from the continuous improvement efforts that you're putting in. No doubt Hickson's doing that. What's the customer seeing as the benefit from that? Is it increasing Hickson's margins, or is it helping with the affordability of the customer's product? And I think that's probably the perspective of the customer you referenced.
Anyone else? Why is this happening? Yes.
Yeah, well, I was going on.
Yeah.
In answer to your question, how did we get to the 100% quality, 100% on-time delivery? I think it's because quality has improved over the last 5-10 years, and it was always the ultimate goal to get to that. Now, there are some companies around the world that are achieving 100% on-time delivery and 100% quality. And we've all got to live up to that standard now. The other thing I'd say about that is, and I think it kind of relates to what Doug was saying about the subjective standards. Right now in my company with Boeing, we are at 100% on both on-time delivery and quality. And the way I got to that was I said to Boeing, you've got to stop generating non-conformances on us. If you do that, our rating's going to go down.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and I tell you, it took me 6 months to get in front of the right people, and I finally got in front of the right people, and I said, look, here's a breakdown of the last 20 rejects you gave us. One of them is legitimate. One of them I accept there was an error. The other 19 were all your fault. You either installed it incorrectly, you put the wrong software on it. I mean, our products are extremely complicated. And they listened and they said, yeah, you're right. They did an investigation and they found out that all these rejects were just not valid. So now when they get a reject, they call me and they say, we're going to send this back. Can you disposition it? Tell us if we're right or you're right. And that's the way we do it now. So there is a huge value in talking to these people and establishing the relationship. Not easy. It's not easy getting to the right people, but it can be done.
Good, thank you. Anybody else? Why is this happening? Oh, Jason.
Yeah, I was going to say, why is it happening now in particular? I think the aerospace companies are looking at the decline of the American automotive industry. I mean, it's happened in the last 10 years and the bailout and everything else. I think that has to be part of it.
Automotive industry. Anybody else? Why is this happening? 100% on time and 0. Did somebody is that like a clever ad campaign that somebody thought of?
I think it's just an evolution of leaning up your business. I think there's lessons learned from the automobile industry. I think there's lessons learned that as companies have looked at managing their businesses, all of that late delivery and quality defects is waste. It costs everybody money in the process. So I think part of it is that how do we become more competitive? And I think it's driven all the way down. I think by default, the competitive nature of the marketplace is saying, if I don't start achieving those numbers, I can't compete in this business environment because of the waste associated with it. So I think it's partly a motivation by the industry, but I think it's partly survival, is that you're going to have to do it to be able to keep a substantial business operation.
Yeah, good.
I think if the industry is saying we're going to be lean and we're going to have lean experts and we're going to lean out our supply chains, then you can't say, but we want low ratings. We want low benchmarks, or if we're going to say we're the supreme superior industry in the world, then our measures or metrics should reflect that. And if we're saying that the aerospace industry is going to lean out, and we've been doing this for 10, 15 years, then there should be some results to show that. But I think another challenge is complacency or sloppiness or ego may creep in, because look at what happened to Toyota. I think Japanese manufacturing, lean manufacturing originates from Toyota, and what happened with the pedal thing and the whole Prius thing. So if you keep your eye off the ball, just because you're lean and just because you've mastered lean or you have senseis on your staff, that's not going to get you there long term.
I'll jump in, and I think a lot of this is just due to the increased competition out there. Earlier this morning at the Supplier Advisory Committee meeting, we looked at over the last 10 years. We were looking at Boeing and Airbus and the number of deliveries year by year. It was just interesting to look at, 1 year Boeing's up, and next year Airbus is up and going. Now, if you think about the world, economy, with the C919 coming in and all the other players coming in to compete for, the single-aisle aircraft, it's just the increased competition that's going to be driving, the cost down of these airplanes, and the cost got to come out of somewhere, and it's got to come out of the supply chain.
Good. Yes, Becky.
So I look at this, whenever I look at those two metrics, you can split them apart. One's part per million, the other one's on-time delivery. All right, so if we look at the quality part of it, it's always been the goal of Lean and Six Sigma and some other quality programs to drive that to zero defects. So we can understand specifically in this industry why that's so important, right? So if you have a defect on something that's in the sky, right, you can't pull over. So that by itself we can address and say, all right, zero defects has a very tangible life impacting reason. Now the on-time delivery part of it, just put yourself in their perspective, in their shoes, from the prime's perspective. If they're the furthest down the value stream, and you have this cascading delay stacking up from all their different vendors that are supplying them, then ultimately their project's going to be delayed, right? So what has driven that recently is, probably some of these major companies that'll, I won't name, but you could probably go ahead and do that have major projects that are causing them, PR nightmare because they're so many years out. So from their perspective, what they want to do is set the bar at 100%, saying, listen, if you get your stuff to me on time, then I have a little bit of room that I can set my schedule to make my delivery. But if you chew up all my headroom by all the delays from the people that are all my suppliers, then there's nowhere for me to go, and then it puts them in a very bad position. So they have to take some stance, and why shouldn't that be 100%?
Well, I think in a lean environment, you should have tack time, and if you have tack time, then all your feeder stations or feeder parts should be coming in at that calculation. So I read years ago, this is not up to date, but I heard that the Camry plant in Japan was one Camry every 60 seconds, and every 60 seconds a boat pulled up, because every 60 seconds it loaded up X amount of cars, and then that would move out, and then another boat would put up, and the Camrys would go. So there is no room for late delivery, and there's no room for bad quality. So in a mature lean environment, you need that high level of quality, you need that on-time delivery. So if the aerospace is going to that model, I'm sure Boeing has a takt time for the 87, I'm sure they have a takt time for the 37, there's no room. But you can't, otherwise you're not going to hit the 35 planes a month, you're going to hit 34 and a half.
Right, right. And so where do we find the room? And I believe this is where Jason was talking about vendor-owned inventory, right? So they're going to say, if you're not going to meet your time, then you're going to own inventory that's sitting out in front. So whenever the boat pulls up to the dock, you own all the stuff that sits there if you can't meet that takt time. So there again is the physical manifestation of that process inefficiency. If you're not able to live in a just-in-time or near real-time environment, then you're going to pay the price by owning all that stock. So
I think independent of it, I think the OEMs have lost patience for the supply chain to be lean, and they're basically saying, you're going to forward locate inventory that's going to be owned by you here. And if you prove over time, because you've got a lean business, that you can have less forward staged, I'm going to allow you that. But I think this whole on-time thing will take care of itself, because you're going to be managed to replenishing a buffer of a two bin at the customer that they're going to physically see, and it's not going to be late to when it's not going to hold up the assembly line any longer, because they're going to be in your shorts if you don't have a month's worth of inventory staged there. So if things are out, they've got a month to go work with you to solve for it, as opposed to, I didn't get it, the machine stopped.
that's right. And that's their risk mitigation solution.
Exactly.
They push it back to you, and it doesn't cost them anything.
Okay, over here.
You mentioned Taguchi earlier, and on the loss function, any deviation from the nominal value is a loss to society. So that would be a good reason to continually improve, to go to zero defects. But it's not the reason why we do it. We do it because of cost. And we're shoving the cost off to different people. Taking the responsibility is what we all need to do. I like what Doug said a little while ago when he said, what do we do when the customer wants to do everything at the end of the month? This is about cost too. So we set up a whole system that's not level loaded and can't be level loaded because of the way we're all trying to save money. And his answer was, we just build a system that will do it. We'll build a machine that will do it. It's kind of what you're saying, Frank, too. Let's build a machine that will make this work. But one of the things we're saying is, and also understand that one of the things that, one of the forms of waste is rework or repair, quality. Quality is one of the 7 forms of waste. And so you've got waste, you're going to have problems with lean or delivery, on-time delivery. But you know, it seems to me like the thing that's really missing is they added a form of waste. They had 7 originally, and they said, but one of the biggest forms of waste is knowledge disconnect. Knowledge disconnect. And there's 2 forms of it. One is we don't know how to do it, and I found this out by going to China, that they don't know how to do it, so they probably don't know how to use those machinery that they're ordering. But maybe we don't know how to use them either, and we probably don't have any money to buy it here. You know, we just had a session not too long ago where we talked about cash, not having cash, because with the supply chains getting wrung out. The other form of knowledge, though, is just knowing what you're supposed to do. You know, the fact that you don't know what the standard is doesn't mean your process messed up. It means your process was built to the wrong standard. You know, when we look at PPM, we're really talking about we made a defect because our process failed, not because we didn't know how to set a standard and it was some argument about whether or not it met the criteria or not. So you can see that there's a huge disconnect with knowledge when we don't see across the whole supply chain. So I guess my question would be, what effect do you think the lack of a holistic view, because some of you talked about, and I've said this, I advocate this as well, is we have to look at it from the whole supply chain standpoint. We can't look at it based on each individual part of the organization. I know we look at it, we say, okay, we're here because we're all trying to get better, and if everybody gets better, then we'll solve all the problems. The truth is, if we don't get better across the whole supply chain, You know, even into the part of planning and things that don't have to do with value-added work, but across the whole supply chain from raw material all the way to the end user, then we really got a problem. So it's obvious that some of the problems come as a result of customers or other people in the supply chain creating problems. And we could do the same thing. We could say, okay, our customers are telling us that we're going to make our suppliers, our customers are telling us they want us to hold the inventory, so we can make our suppliers hold the inventory. The problem is the backs are already breaking, our backs are already breaking, at least with the automotive industry. Toyota could step up and take what GM, Ford, and Chrysler weren't able to do. Who's going to step up if we do the same thing to the aerospace industry? And, you know, and our safety is at stake here. Our economic well-being as a country is at stake here. You know, the world is at stake here from an economic standpoint on this. So this is a huge thing. What effect is us not working together having?
Okay, here's a little story for you. I'm an OEM. I know I look too short to be an OEM, but I'm an OEM. And I've been making aircraft, you know, 5 or 10 a month, and you know, it takes me anywhere from 4 months to 12 months to make this aircraft. And I'm dealing with 20,000 suppliers on this program. And they're all shipping me parts directly. It's, you know, the year is about 2,000. And so what's that, 12 years ago? Wow, time flies, huh? And, you know, we just pull parts and integrate, kit them, and move them out on the floor ourselves. You know, if we got a lot of bad parts, we just go back into the bins and pull out more until we can get a kit. We got 100 parts a day that we can't find, or you know, are bad or out, you know, out of rev, and so, but you know, it takes 4 to 6 months to build an aircraft, so who cares? We'll just go back to the supplier and say, you know, ship us another one. So, you know, when it takes me 6 months to build an aircraft, you know, what's a couple of days late? You know, everybody's a couple of days late. And, you know, Douglas or Hughes or Bob Northrop didn't worry about that kind of stuff, so why should I? And then all of a sudden, you know, I turn around twice and I'm building an aircraft in a month. And a couple of days late, starting to become a problem. Not to mention that we had a bunch of consultants in, and they told us that how much inventory cost. For every $1 million of inventory, I'm spending $200,000 to warehouse it and, you know, inventory it and move it around and all that stuff. You know, my carrying costs are 18 to 20%. After that, we never looked at inventory the same. So then the whole idea became point of use and, you know, moving direct from suppliers into production. Then I turned around again and I was trying to build an aircraft in 2 weeks. And then 1 day late or one part became a much bigger issue, right? When I'm trying to build an aircraft in 3 days and I'm trying to do it with zero inventory, 5 minutes cost me $1 million. Which is just another way to say that with me, it all comes down to the money. You know, it's not the altruism of, you know, it's good to be at 0 ppm or, you know, 100% on time. It's money. When I'm building planes in 3 or 4 days, it costs me millions for anything to go wrong with that process. Or, you know, as Frank so elegantly said it, anybody who stops a machine, you can't stop the machine. You can't stop a machine that's building aircraft with zero inventory in 3 or 4 days. You can't do that. And because it costs too much. And the problem is, in the last 10 years, I've learned as an OEM that, that's where my costs are. So I'm not putting up with it. I'm going to do chargebacks. I'm going to do everything I can to move that problem and the cost of it back to somebody else, because all I want to do is high-speed assembly of aircraft. Does that make sense? That's what happened. It's not that we went from building 737s to 25 or any of that. It's that we went from building them in 3 or 4 months to building them in a couple of days. We went from looking at inventory as a safety to looking at inventory as a cost. Big changes in the point of view of the customer. And of course, that's resulted in all the flow down that we've seen. And that's why it's pretty certain that it's not going to go away. So we had a discussion about 0 PPM and 100% on time, and now after the break, we're going to move into our second discussion. And I think Doug began to cue that up very well. Here's a study that we did back in 2010 when we were setting the C certification criteria. I know it's probably kind of an eye test, and it's all over the map. What was gold, silver, and bronze for PPM and on-time delivery for a lot of different players across the industry? And we weren't emphasizing anybody in particular, but we're just trying to get a feeling for, where is everybody in terms of those levels. And we could see that there was a lot of variation, in how our customers look at us, how they measure us. But we could see also that at the same time that it was, as Frank had described, it was a fast-moving target. Even with the proposed numbers, most of our customers were telling us, we're looking for better than that. In other words, we got the feeling that setting those numbers, the only reason we could set those numbers and have the customers agree with it was because they didn't have that many suppliers that were achieving those numbers. But, it would just be a matter of time before they did. So this second discussion, we said we wanted to talk about how customers measure our performance and how that influences our behavior. And I think that Doug queued this up excellently with his comments, so I asked him to come back and kind of renew your comments, if you would, and your question.
I forgot. Too much water. No, my comment question was, the future. Where are we going with this future? If you're performing at high levels, and I know it's an evolution that the matrix is going to spread out, and I understand there's costs, but if you're performing at 100% on-time delivery, 100% quality, now you're going to be measured at with continuous improvement in mind, cost savings in mind, and one other matrix that I can't recall. What does that look like, and where does it end, or does it end?
Thank you. Comments or questions so far from the audience? Panel members? I know some of you or all of you have prepared comments on this topic, so let's dive in. Here's the questions that we prepared for this topic. How do my customers measure my company's performance? How well does that align with how I measure my company's performance? How well is my customers' measures working? I think that's the area that Doug is pointing in. And then what are examples of where inaccurate measures affected my business? Who'd like to start?
I did have a thought, so maybe I'll just share my thought. You said you got a 60 rating. I could beat that. I got a 40 rating. We polished foreign parts, and it was a 5-day lead time, and we were getting the parts to them in 4. It was a hot rush order. Later on in the quarter, it comes down that we were late 50% of the time or over 50% of the time. And so we challenged it, how could we be late? And they said, well, we were late, therefore you were late. So we measure ourselves as a supply chain. And my team was really upset because they take a lot of pride in being process driven, in training the employees, and in exceeding customer expectations, especially processing hot or urgent orders. And so to be dinged that way, they just didn't want that out there. They saw it as negative publicity. They saw it as an unearned black eye. They said this is unacceptable, it's unprofessional, and one guy even mentioned getting an attorney or something. I said, wait, let's slow down here. but I think it's still undefined. I think the primes are unsure how they're going to manage this. I think that the picture is not clear. I think the only thing that's clear is that the production rates are going up and demand is going up. But how we're managing the supply chain, how the supply chain is going to perform, how we're going to rate, what the fallout is going to be is still undetermined. I also think some departments in tier 3 and 2 companies are just not that good, and they just blame some of the suppliers. So I think the industry, the supply chain is still flushing itself out. I think there's a lot of questions that need to be answered and a lot of issues that still need to be addressed. But if you can blame your supplier and you look clean, some companies will do it.
Comments or questions for Mario? Any examples that you have? Yes, right back here.
Okay, you got a 40% rating from this client, and I certainly can recognize the emotional feelings by you and your employees. But at the end of the day, what was the repercussions? Are you still supplying to this client? Are there any repercussions? Did you get a black eye in the industry? The reason I'm asking that, kind of going back to Doug's question, in the future, what's the future going to look like? I mean, at some point, this is all about competition, is it not? I mean, if they're going to think like money, so shouldn't we? And if you're not losing any business over it, because there's no one else that can perform better than you, and you're the best supplier, maybe it's not that significant of an event. So just maybe some comments would be helpful.
It was easy for me because I have problems to have our customers take a meeting with me because they say, you are not a problem. We don't have any issues with you. You're our best suppliers. I have problems with other suppliers. That's where I really want to meet. So our reputation is solid in the industry within our segment. And there was actually no consequences. I mean, I didn't get a call from a Boeing. I didn't get a call from a Bombardier. Cessna didn't call and say, we're going to send somebody to inspect your process. I think I instinctively knew that it was just going to be a supplier rating for that customer, and that we were just going to be ranked low. But they're struggling, and they're probably being ranked low. So I wanted to dismiss it because I didn't think there was going to be any public announcement or anything saying MPC caused this. So, but my team didn't want to dismiss it. Where it did impact is they wanted to sign a long-term agreement. They wanted to lock in price reductions, and they wanted to set up new metrics. So I just kind of said, hold on, we need to talk through this because we've got some issues we got to resolve and come to common ground before we start talking a long-term agreement. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Now, in your process, did that kick off an internal corrective action because you got a low rating? I mean, did you have to follow your steps?
Yeah, this just happened 8 months ago. So our lead time is 5 days. We were doing it in 4. We were micromanaging some of the changeovers. In other words, we had extra people expediting the parts to reduce the changeovers to 10 minutes, right? So normally we don't have somebody babysitting that. As soon as the part was done, the expediter was there, he'd grab it and he'd take it over and we'd bring the next part in. That's not our normal process. But in this case, because we needed to shave a day off, we were doing stuff like that. It did not trigger corrective action. It did not trigger any kind of analysis of that department or of that process. It's not even a top 5 on our Kaizen events for this fiscal year. That department is performing extremely well. It's extremely reliable. We get letters every year from all the other customers. But what emerged is we have 5 customers, and 4 have adapted to the increase in the production rate. 4 have kept their promises in terms of communication, and 4 have come through on their moving away from batch and queue and going more for a daily delivery. 4 of them have done it. 1 of them has not. That one is the one who struggled. And so my conclusion was, boy, not all my customers, they say they're lean. And then they said, we can send you our Kaizen guys to help you out with your changeover. I go, no, keep them and work at your own place. So, and awareness for me is 5 customers doing the same type of work. 4 of them performed, 1 didn't. So I'm not gonna lose sleep or blame myself. I think sometimes the customers are at fault there.
I want to tag on to Bill, your comment. For us, we have to fight every single ding we get because it's in a database, and a lot of our customers are connected at some level through some different web porthole systems. So for us, with over 3,000 customers, this is valuable stuff. If they don't know us, all they know is some black and white letters on a page. So we have literally a team of people that every time we get these reports, we have to go in, we have to look at our data, we have to look at the data that's supplied, if we get data supplied, and we have to protect that rating at all costs. Your situation is always obviously unique, so we have to have the conversation every time, because at the end of the day, we may have a division, halfway around the world that we're somehow not on the supplier list because we have a low rating. So for us, they're crucial. You gotta protect them with everything you got. Yeah, your mic's not turned on, by the way.
Did you hear me?
Yeah, I heard you. You got to balance that, right? There's no such thing as a bad customer, but we all know there's bad customers. And at the end of the day, you got to look at that, and I guess it's like an employee, right? Once the bad outweighs the good, you got to either get them on an improvement plan or you got to get them out. It's pretty hard, especially at the level we are in the food chain. We wish we were the end of the tail. We're the flea on the end of the tail is where we are. So it's tough, but we've made some of those decisions in the past. They're very rare. We'll do everything we can to work with them. But if they're just not listening, and you know how it usually ends up working, they go away, but they come back. And they come back with a different set of eyes, a different filter, and maybe we weren't so bad. Maybe we were the best of the worst. So.
Now, Dwight, comment on that, or are you going to? Okay, just for Doug then, before we go. So, Doug, the comment you made about affecting business from other divisions, I think maybe that, in some cases, that's a factor for us because some of us are looking for business from other divisions of this company. You're dealing with a large company, the scorecards reflect that problem, and then the other division looks at it and you're out. How real is that problem?
I don't know. They tell us it's very real because they have, they'll show you the matrix and they'll say if you drop below this, you're on the improvement plan. If you drop below this level, you're on your way out unless you don't improve. So have we really seen a division say, no, we can't use you based on your rating global? No. But what about the missed opportunities? What about the people that don't say, we're not even going to give this guy a chance, we're not going to send an RFQ, we're not going to do anything, the rating's below this, so I'll just move on to the next guy. Mm-hmm. So I got to believe it happens. We've never been told it happens, but it all, our attitude is just protect the rating. At all costs, protect the rating.
And has this happened to anybody in the audience? Good. Okay.
I just wanted to tack on something to what Doug had said. we do very actively challenge the bad scores that we get, and I have the opportunity to be on that team at times. And one really good byproduct that I've experienced from that is that when you open up those discussions, it's an invitation for collaboration. It shows, especially for us, since we're so far down that supply chain, we don't often get a good rap, I'll say, about being concerned at all with improving and being concerned with the overall product integrity. So when we have these discussions, it's an invitation for collaboration with the customer. It forges new relationships, and it also does expose at times our own internal disconnects in our own systems. Sometimes we'll have a faulty scorecard of our own supplier. They'll come back to me and say, hey, what's the score for? And all of a sudden we figure out there's something in our system that wasn't firing the way it should have been. Our supplier was in the right, and we just got better because of this scorecard.
Mm-hmm. Good, very good. Anybody else in the audience have this experience with scorecards affecting your interdivisional business?
We get a scorecard from Boeing, and then of course they're looking, because we're OEM, so all the groups are looking at the scorecard, and it's all accumulated together. And we work in the Seattle area, and we're getting dinged for on-time delivery, and the Boeing truck stops at our door every day and picks up their parts that are due every day, and I'm like, how in the world can we have an on-time delivery issue with Boeing? And so I pull up the scorecard and I go in, and it happens to be the one group in Kansas that we ship parts to, and we weren't late, we were early. But that's still an on-time delivery issue. We missed that 8-day window by a day. We were 9 days early. But it's the same thing. It's that disconnect of the shipping department said, anytime Boeing stuff is ready, ship Boeing stuff. Well, that didn't mean shipping Boeing stuff. It said, get it on the truck. So it was kind of funny that we go find we're shipping early. And that's as bad to Boeing, because they've got to hold that inventory, and that's money holding that inventory. That's almost as bad as being late.
Yeah, good point. They're now looking at early and late. And then was your comment?
Well, I just wanted to add to what I was saying earlier about stopping the supplier from generating non-conformances. When we were having that conversation with them, you're absolutely right. It opened up a whole new world of collaboration with us. We got to meet with the right engineers and the right people. They got to know us. We got to know them. So it turned out to be a very valuable process in the end. And talking about disconnects, it's not only disconnects in your own company. What we did find out is that the engineers that we were talking to, which were really the project engineers on our project that were using our product, were completely disconnected from the people that were rejecting our product. There was a complete disconnect there, and it turned out that they really had no idea what they were doing, and as soon as something went wrong, they just rejected it back on us, and they didn't realize that was going on. So it gave them the opportunity to clear up their house as well. So it was very valuable.
Good, very good. Thank you. So, Doug, you said you have a team doing this?
Yeah, actually, Jennifer, she is my assistant. She handles part of that. We have another individual, and then, of course, our quality manager gets involved, and, of course, at times I'll get involved depending on what level. So at any given time, there's 1 through 4 people literally working on these. And again, we're not complaining, but at the same time, if you have, 10 customers, it's a little bit different task than if you have 3,000 customers. Right. And because of AS 9100C, now we have to rate all of our suppliers, all of our vendors. So that's certainly adding a workload to that situation. But I did want to just tag on to something that you had comment. We're gold and gold with Boeing as well. And we inappropriately shipped early. And we went from gold to silver literally overnight. And we've been gold for 10 years. We did the exact same thing. We called them and said, our bad. Let's look at the longevity. Let's look at the history. Let's put some human element into this rather than just the data points. And let's reverse that. They said, thank you for talking to us. Nope, it is what it is. You are now gold and bronze. And the bad thing about that is now I have to go 12 months to dilute that to the point where we can get into the silver range, get into the gold range. I don't know how many opportunities we might miss because of that one issue over many periods of being perfect. And maybe to Frank's point, is, you know, these companies should start looking at this from a human aspect, not strictly just data. You've got to put some human element into it. You've got to look at, you know, what was the purpose to mess up their supply line? Of course not. What was the intent? The intent was we had a shipping clerk that certainly didn't know. The paperwork didn't tell him to slow down, and we don't slow down for anything. Well, I mean, we're a bullet train, so telling us to slow down for anything at all is insanity. But it is what it is. It's their rules. It just seems like we should put some fairness into the program.
Okay. And Dwight, I think you were ready.
Yeah, I guess I was going to talk about something else, but this Boeing discussion got me reminiscing about something that happened with us as well. Yeah, we had a fairly long-term contract directly with Boeing, and we're also a gold supplier as well. And halfway through the program, Boeing's parts failed. They went into an R&D mode. They eventually got back into test, eventually passed the test successfully. But you know, after it was all done, our rating went from gold down to bronze. And when we you know, started looking into it, we realized that the purchase order delivery date was not changed as a result of that change, and we got dinged because the original delivery date was before we actually delivered it. But again, it was not our fault; it was Boeing's fault, and it took quite a bit of negotiation to get that clarified. But like a lot of people have said in the audience here, it's turning lemons into lemonade, because then you can open up a dialogue with your customer and forge some really nice relationships through those situations. But I also wanted to make another comment about in our industry, our customers measure us in a lot of different ways. And in many cases, they don't measure us directly. Through our survey process, we get their measurements back, and we really take those surveys really seriously. But the ones that I don't get back are the ones that keep me awake at night, because if a customer goes away, maybe we did something and you don't know about it, those are the ones you really get anxious about. So that's why our surveying program is pretty aggressive to see how we're doing in measuring ourselves.
Very good. Comments or questions for Dwight? Okay, thank you. Who's ready next?
Are you there? Okay. We sell across a broad range, being a distributor. We sell, excuse me, to OEMs, to the tier ones like and to the tier twos and tier threes, and down to the home hobbyist. So we have a myriad of customer rating scenarios. We get rated by the OEMs, obviously, I talked about earlier. And by the tier ones pretty consistently. And then after that, it's a mixed bag. We're on the other end of the supplier surveys, and then we send out to that group supplier surveys. So you kind of learn over time. If you'll respond to them, they'll respond to you. If you send out 100 customer surveys and you get 30% back, you're out dancing in the halls. The quality director is, because that's pretty, about 10 to 15 is about what you can hope for. So, but from an alignment standpoint with the company's performance, everybody is measuring, obviously, PPM now. We do that both for our suppliers and for our customers. And on-time delivery and costs, those are the three major ones that you always see in everybody's measurements. Is it helpful? We take that feedback and obviously run a lot of our activities around improving our customer performance. And we've grown double digits the last 5 years. Hopefully, it's because we pay attention to those things and we work on the right things. And when things are inaccurate, what are examples of that? I think every one of us up here on the panel, be it a customer well, every one of us has had an example where you get something inaccurate, you can't get it changed, and you get put in a penalty box. And you get put in a penalty box, and you can't explain your way out of it. You just have to sit there and wait. And so it is very important to have the relationship, to find the right people, to try to clear up what is really an unfair assessment. Sometimes you just can't. You just get to live with it. And it's very frustrating, and you sit there and watch the clock until it goes away. But that's my comments.
Thank you. Thank you. Any comments or questions for Tim?
When you get positive feedback, what do you do about that?
I share it with the employees at the quarterly meetings. And also, if I can get back to the customer and say we appreciate it, to reinforce that it's nice to get positive, we'll do that too. But we certainly like to share both, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and really reinforce the good with the employee population.
Okay, and who's next?
I think the last question on there, which is examples of inaccurate measures affecting the business, maybe not what you intended when you asked the question, but what Doug talked about, where you have a team of people addressing your inaccurate scores, I think you would probably find is the case with any of the companies doing business for the OEMs that have a good score. We do the same thing, and so do the other suppliers, that if you have a score somewhere in the 98, 99, 100% range, you probably have people that are spending a vast majority of their time reversing the inaccurate data. And that's a problem, I think, that we're all going to have to solve together between the customers and the suppliers. And the same thing happens for us, as you mentioned, rating our suppliers. It's the same situation. We hit them for inaccuracies also. And all of us together are spending a tremendous amount of energy trying to talk about and fight these rejections and argue about whose fault it is. And it's going to get worse as we start being charged for delivery in particular, which our customers are talking about doing now. So if they say, for every day that you're late, you're going to be fined so many dollars, that's going to make it worse, because now we have more motivation to try to figure out how it wasn't our fault. And the ones that are our fault, we're still spending the same amount of time on those when it's not necessary. So it's I think a lot of wasted effort, and I don't have the answer yet, but it's something that's going to have to be fixed, I think.
Thank you. Comments or questions for Jason? All right, then let's move on.
I would almost rephrase the first question in saying, how do my customers measure my company beyond just the performance? I think performance is one of those elements. We kind of break it into three things: business risk, the financial risk, and performance risk. So there's a lot of things that go into this. For example, on the business risk side of stuff we look at, there was a lot of discussion about, do we have a long-term agreement with that supplier? Are they a sole source supplier? Are they a sole proprietor that has a 75-year-old owner with no succession plan in place? Are they a public company that has a leadership team? Are they a private held company that could change hands? We just got notice today of a supplier that's changed hands. So there's certain business continuity risks that are associated with that. But we get into, and then financially, we subscribe to DNB, so we look at financial stress scores of our suppliers on a recurring basis as well. On a performance side, and I think that's, it fundamentally comes down to three things. It is your quality performance, your delivery performance, and your cost performance. And there's the two sides of the cost performance, is that what's happening with your prices? Are your prices going up inconsistent with what's happening in the marketplace? And if you're a sole source supplier, that sometimes can happen. So that's why there's a big cost risk or performance risk associated with that. And then what are you doing collectively, or what are we, probably better stated, what are we doing collectively to look at how do we take cost out of the business to be able to address that. So fundamentally on the performance side, it probably falls into those three things: quality, delivery, and your cost performance. And I'll talk a little bit tomorrow, and I've talked about this before, sometimes your performance can be poor, but you got the right stuff. So a company will invest in helping you get better because they know once you get things organized that you have the infrastructure to be successful. We've got some suppliers today that are performing incredibly well, but we won't give them new business because there's some type of potential future risk with their business. For example, succession or something. Unless that's reconciled, we don't want to grow those businesses to the point where it becomes a bigger risk in the future. So there's a lot of attributes that you've got to look at in your business to make your customer feel comfortable that I'm not just providing good performance today, but I'm a sustainable business that's going to be around to support you as well.
Okay. Questions for Frank or comments? Down here.
That's interesting comments. And now, is that clearly defined when you go and sit down with those suppliers, and they could be knocking out of the park every day for you, but they don't have a succession plan, or they're maybe, do they know what they need to work on to
Not at all. No. So we've got, and Frank covered about half of them. We have about 10 factors that we put into our risk analysis on the supply base. And yeah, if a risk factor comes up, we're going to go approach them and say, we have a concern here, and let's talk through it. It's kind of like asking, hey, what's your capacity, right? You always hear 80%. And if you get one of those answers, you got to dig a little deeper. And it's the same thing with the succession plan. Oh, my brother, my manager, whatever. Then you want to see, do you see the skill set that's going to continue that business the way it's been, that's created that relationship that's strong for Parker and the company? Or are there concerns with that next generation of management? So yeah, you certainly approach that. You need to validate the information that you get from our risk tool, whether it's D&B scores or whatever.
Other comments or questions for Frank?
This is more addressing the question. I know on the Boeing rate readiness reviews, succession planning, emergency planning, all of those items are on the rate readiness review, and you want to get that to a green state. You want to be at the highest score you can get on every single item on that rate readiness review. And their expectation is that you're flowing it down then to your suppliers and that they're flowing it down to their suppliers. It's a little tough to do that with a mom and pop shop or the smaller companies, but we understand the obligation to flow down everything they're asking us to ask all the full supply chain and keep going.
So we hear quite often that one of the out-of-the-box metric sets is SQDC, safety, quality, delivery, and cost, which seems to be universally adopted. It's a measurement system that touches on a lot of the interesting areas. Now, have any of you guys incorporated what's known, more around the balanced scorecard methodology, which really looks into it enables investors and customers and all these different people to have a little bit more forward-thinking perspective relative to a healthier company, meaning there are metrics that you look at the customer-facing metrics that you derive for your business, and then you have a learning and growth perspective. So a company can say, let's say it's Parker and they want to come and look at you, they can say, well what's your safety, what's your quality, what's your delivery, and your cost? Okay. So those are potentially lagging indicators. But what leading indicators, what do you have for me to predict future performance of your company? Meaning, how much money are you putting into R&D? How much money are you putting into training? Or how much effort, not necessarily money? How much time, effort? What does your program look like to help develop your people? So if we understand that we have a changing economy, we understand that we have changing needs from your suppliers, what are you doing to get in front of that? So a balanced scorecard approach with strategy mapping is typically a well-defined methodology to map that process out and deliver that forward-thinking sort of message to people that would be, the stakeholders that would be interested in that. So relative to forward or more predictive metrics on a corporate level, have any of you addressed that and potentially talking about R&D, talking about customer facing? I know you talked about a lot of scorecards from your customers and also learning and growth, a learning and growth perspective from your company.
Okay, I vote that we award Jason the longest question award.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would say we've got a similar document. Internally of how we forward face to our customer, we have a document called a WIN scorecard that is a balanced scorecard. What we've done to extend that into the supply chain, we have a business assessment questionnaire. And the tough part is, I absolutely agree with you, but some of these things are hard to quantify, right? So what we do is we put a score of 1 to 5 on all these attributes. And then what we will do is have a radar diagram that will say, we've looked at your lean portion of your business, your financial risk, your succession risk, and we'll give them a score. And the tough part with this is you've got to have the right people in it, because a lot of small businesses, surprisingly, have people that were entrepreneurial that have big egos. So sometimes it's tough to have a dialogue about the heart of their business that doesn't become too intrusive. So what we try to do is to go forward in a very friendly manner to say, what we're trying to do is to help you assess your business, isolate where we think you have some opportunities to improve your business, and then provide a score of 1 to 5 on each of these attributes. Because it's hard to say, are you investing what's the right number for you in your business going forward, but certainly an attribute we look at.
Just a follow-up comment. You say you guys look at the Dun and Bradstreets, and entrepreneurs also tend to be very protective of their financials and their information. And so just a word to the wise, because a lot of people refuse to give any information to them and to update them. And so what gets put in there is by other people than yourself. And when early on and after the buyout, when we went and looked at the Dun and Bradstreets, and they were 20-year-old data in there. So you get some, yeah. But
it's tougher. If you're a publicly held company, it's easy.
Yeah.
A privately held company,
Correct.
you get things like payment.
Right. That's about it. And, so.
But it is an indication of financial strength.
Yeah. So, you have to decide as a privately held company whether you want that to be accurate in there or whether you want it to be 20 years old, the structure and those kind of things in there. So, it was really for us, not for you, to think about.
Okay, any comments or questions?
I've got one, Michael.
Yes.
To get back to Jason's question, part of the C roadmap is leadership and culture processes, and in those processes, there's strategic planning. And for NTS, we certainly have adopted the strategy mapping and the balanced scorecard as part of that. So it's really now it's an integral part of our C implementation. So.
Yeah. As part of our journey, we've created a balanced scorecard that takes several elements and groups them into sections, and created basically a pentagon, and with measurements defined on the 5 corners. And if you're 100% performance on all 5 of those combined elements, the pentagon is totally green. And if you're lacking, then it'll show red, proportionate to how far you are off on those performances. And it's a really good tool to show to the employees, because they can say, oh, okay, we're good on sales, weren't good over here on customer, weren't good here on supplier or finance or and I'm going to have a Perry moment here, being from Texas. I don't remember the 5th one.
we have what's called an operations business plan, and we have the quality, cost, speed, and people. And every year we list all the projects that we want to do under each category, and it's like a Gantt chart. So we have the major categories, and then we put all the projects underneath there, and then there's a timeline by quarter, and we prioritize the first 2 quarters, and that becomes our project list. So this answers the investment. How do we track it? How do we know what we're doing? So what we don't want to do is schedule 2 Kaizens and a site visit and an AS surveillance audit all in the same month. That won't work. So twofold, it captures everything. Number 2, you time it out. And number 3, we keep track of what we did. It helps us prioritize, and we can renegotiate projects and reprioritize throughout the year.
Okay, any other comments on that question? And panel members, anybody else have comments that you wanted to share that you haven't shared yet?
Maybe I can just add a little abstract view from the machine tool industry. We as an organization, so the part of the company that I'm responsible for, sells around 700 machine tools per year in the Americas. And we have an installed base of about 20,000 machines. We're not governed by any formal scorecards, and we used to measure ourselves by customer loyalty. So repeat business was the obvious measure. If we've done a reasonably good job, our customers will buy more machines from us. But a couple of years ago, we realized that that really wasn't doing the trick, because if you're only supplying 700 machines a year, then the sample is quite small. And and of course, you can't rely on repeat business as a good measure, because some of your customers may only repeat their investment once every 5 years. So it's kind of tough. So the thing that we concluded that was most important was the criteria of the propensity to recommend. So we use a system which is, I think, quite widely understood, called the Net Promoter Score. And we survey our customers on a very intensive level around the world. I think every month 2,000 surveys goes out. Here in the Americas, it's around about 200. And we ask them a bunch of questions. We ask them to rate us on a scale of 0 through 10. And those questions are the obvious ones: rate our service. Were we fast to respond? Did the installation go well? Was the sales process good? Et cetera, et cetera. I think you've probably all been exposed to this. But then the final question is, would you recommend our organization to a friend or colleague? Because we feel that that is finally the most important criteria, because if somebody's prepared to recommend you to a friend or colleague, there's some skin in that game. You know, if it's a buddy, it's a colleague that you've done business with, or it's a friend, then you're not going to make a recommendation that is not going to be, or you don't feel is going to be relatively successful. So we measure that now on a very, very intensive basis. We do it very regularly. The way that it works is from 0 to 10. 0 through 6 is regarded as a detractor. 7 and 8 are neutral. 9 and 10 are promoters, and you take the promoters away from the detractors, and you come up with your Net Promoter Score. And we then benchmark ourselves against the best in class.
Very good, thank you. Comments or questions for Glenn? Okay, so let's get to panel. Let's get to any closing comments you'd like to make about this or either of the topics. And audience, any final questions or comments you'd like to give the panel?
I guess my closing comment would be, it boils down to, all of this boils down to communications. Like any good relationship, personal or business, I think we as suppliers have to do a better job and communicate to the OEMs and our customers. And at the same time, we would ask in turn that the OEMs and the tier ones would do a better job in talking and communicating with us. So life is all about communications. We're a successful company, we think, because we communicate very well, both internally and externally, and we're trying to do more of that with our customers. We're trying to get more intimate with them, closer, so when you do have those issues with scores, you automatically know which guy to go talk to, and you don't have to find, you don't have to go through layers and layers. So be intimate with your customer and just work together. We're all in this together. We got to build safe aircrafts, and we got to protect this industry.
Thank you, Doug. Anyone else have any closing comments?
Yeah, it's something that Kenny said earlier today that's been on my mind all afternoon, taking this holistic approach through the industry. And I guess my closing comment would be, it's groups like this and sharing ideas and thoughts and stories that can help. Maybe it's a little bit too altruistic to have a perfect system, but at least these things get us a little bit closer to that holistic approach.
Thank you. Any other panel members? Any other closing comments? Mario.
Yeah, I would challenge everybody in the room to really take your leadership position seriously. Guard it, develop yourself as a leader, continue your personal education, take your network system seriously. When you have conversations with people, really share honestly, and I think you'll get honest feedback and honest discussions. I know I have benefited greatly from the relationships and networking that I've developed here with the C members and at the conferences. So I think leadership cannot be delegated. If everybody took leadership seriously, we'd have a whole bunch of leaders developing a whole bunch of leaders. I was reading the book, How to Make Friends and Influence People, and my son said, "Dad, what are you doing? That's for lonely people." All I could think of was, well, it's lonely at the top, so I'll stop there.
Very good. Any others? Okay, and audience, any final comments? So, here is a panel of CEOs and owners, senior players in their companies, who came to interact with you today. Why do you think they did that? Do you think that I paid them enough? I couldn't pay them enough, right? So why did they do that? Yeah, these are people who want to get out in front of the industry. They want to be in a leadership role. They want to promote promote excellence in the industry, and they want to share that with you and support you in promoting it. Right? They have, I think if their motives aren't obvious for spending their valuable time here to interact with us, then something's missing, because it's obvious that what they came here for is for us. So please join me in thanking them for giving their time to this.